The air in the stone pit always tasted like cold fear and wet earth. My hands shook, not just from the chill that seeped into my bones, but from the dread that clung to this place. Every day, the same walk. Every day, the same task. And every day, the same silent question burning in my gut. How much longer? My name is Clarabelle. To the pack, I'm just Clara. An orphan. A human among wolves who saw me less than the dirt under their paws. My worth was measured by the tasks no one else wanted. Cleaning the kennels, scrubbing the cook fires, and for the last year, feeding the monster. They called him that. The monster. The beast. The traitor king. All spoken in hushed, terrified whispers, especially around me. Because I was the one who saw him daily. I was the one who walked into the darkness where he lay. They'd given me this job because, as the Alpha's beta, Elias Thorne, once sneered, if he kills her, no one will care. She's just a human. His words were meant to wound, to remind me of my place, but they only fueled a quiet, stubborn defiance in my heart. Today, the tray in my hands felt heavier than usual. It wasn't the stale bread or the cold, gristly meat. It was the weight of knowing what waited for me. The guard, a hulking brute named Garrick, grunted as he unlatched the heavy iron door, his torch casting long, dancing shadows that made the pit seem to writhe. The reek of damp stone and something wild, ancient, filled my nose. My breath hitched. Go on, human, Garrick sneered, nudging me forward with the butt of his spear. Don't dawdle. And remember the law. No talking. No merci. His words were a hammer to my chest. No merci. How could they say that when what lay before me was suffering itself? I stepped into the cold, damp stone chamber. The air grew heavier, thick with an unseen power that pressed down on me, making my ears ring. In the center, almost swallowed by the darkness, was the reason for my daily dread. He was massive, even in his starved state. A wolf of midnight fur, so dark it absorbed the weak light from the opening above. But it wasn't his size that stole my breath. It was silver. Thick, shimmering chains, wrapped around his legs, his body, even his muzzle, gleaming like cruel serpents in the gloom. They bit deep into his flesh, raw and angry where they rubbed, oozing sometimes. Every link radiated a cold, suppressive energy that made my skin prickle. His head lifted slowly as I approached, his golden eyes, usually dulled by pain, burning with an intense, almost human intelligence. They locked onto mine. There was no hatred in them, no snarl, just a profound, aching weariness. And something else. A flicker of recognition? A spark of connection I dared not acknowledge, even to myself. I knelt, placing the tray gently on the cold stone floor, just out of his reach. This was the ritual. I was allowed to bring the food, but never too close. Never directly touching. It was part of the ancient law. No human may bond with, speak to, or show mercy to the Alpha King while he is bound. I knew the law by heart. It was whispered in every corner of the pack lands. But I broke it a little every single day. Not with words, no, I was too afraid for that. But with the softest movements, the way I'd gently push the water skin closer, or sometimes, when I thought no one was truly watching, leave a piece of dried fruit, a tiny forbidden kindness. Today, though, was different. His gaze was sharper, more desperate. His massive chest rose and fell with a shallow, ragged breath. He was weaker than I had ever seen him. The silver chains around his muzzle, usually dull with age, seemed to pulse with a faint, malevolent light. He made a low sound, a soft whine that tore at my heart. Not a growl of anger, but a lament, a plea. My eyes welled up. Please don't break, Clara, I told myself. Don't show weakness. But the pity was a physical ache. I remembered the beta's words. He is a monster. You are nothing. And yet, looking into those golden depths, I saw no monster, only a broken king, a magnificent creature, slowly being strangled by the cruel metal that bound him. Then I saw it. A new wound. A deep, jagged gash on his shoulder, weeping dark blood. It wasn't silver. It looked like a fresh cut from a knife or a struggle. My heart pounded. Has someone hurt him? The guards? My hand twitched, wanting to reach out, to soothe, to understand. But the cold logic of the law, the terror of Garrick's sneering face, held me back. I was just Clara. What could I do? The wolf's eyes met mine again, and this time there was a silent message. Not of demand, but of a shared, unbearable pain. It was a moment that stretched, thin and fragile, between us. A bridge of unspoken understanding forming in that desolate pit. He let out another soft whimper, and then, his massive head lowered, resting heavily on the cold stone. He turned his gaze away, as if giving up, as if the last flicker of hope had died. The air around me felt thick, suffocating. My throat closed. I hated this. I hated their laws. I hated being nothing. And in that moment, for the first time, a small, dangerous spark ignited within me. A fire of rebellion against cruelty. A quiet promise that someday, somehow, this couldn't be all there was. I stood, my legs stiff, and walked away from the suffering king, my heart heavy with a burden I couldn't share. The iron door clanged shut behind me, plunging him back into darkness, and me into my own kind of cage. Please let me know where you're watching from and how the weather is there today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of Clara's story. The sun was barely a smudge of gray over the Appalachian foothills when I woke. My room, if you could call it that, was a converted tool shed at the back of the main pack house. It smelled of motor oil and damp wood, but it was the only place in the Black Ridge territory where I wasn't being shoved aside or glared at. I pulled on my worn jeans and a thick flannel shirt. In the rural hills of Kentucky, the morning air was sharp enough to cut. As I walked toward the main kitchen, I passed the training grounds. Even at this hour, the true wolves were out. Hey, orphan. A heavy cloud of mud hit the back of my jacket. I didn't turn around. I knew the voice. It was Silas, the beta's youngest son. He was 17, already a head taller than me, and lived for the sport of reminding me I was human. Make sure you scrub the bucket today, Clara, Silas laughed, his cronies joining in. The beast started howling last night. Maybe he wants a snack that's a little more girl-shaped. I kept my head down, my fingers clenching into fists inside my pockets. They didn't understand. They thought the Alpha King, the man the elders called Cain the Merciless, was a mindless animal. But animals didn't have eyes that looked like they'd seen the birth and death of the world. Animals didn't weep in their sleep. In the kitchen, the head cook, Martha, shoved a heavy wooden tray toward me. It held a bowl of grayish gruel and a single, moldy hunk of bread. He hasn't eaten in 3 days, Martha whispered, her eyes darting around to make sure no one was listening. For all her gruffness, she was the only one who didn't seem to hate him. If he dies, the council will be happy, but the spirits of these woods won't forget. Take this. And Clara, be careful. The beta is in a foul mood. I took the tray, the weight familiar and draining. The walk to the stone pit took 20 minutes through the dense pines. The pack house was a sprawling, modern mansion, but the further you went toward the pit, the more the world felt old. Ancient. The entrance to the pit was a mound of earth reinforced with concrete and silver-flecked steel. 2 guards stood outside, nursing thermoses of coffee. They didn't even look at me. I was a ghost to them. A ghost delivering mail to a corpse. I descended the stairs. The temperature dropped 10 degrees with every step. When I reached the bottom, the silence was absolute. Usually, there was the sound of shifting chains or the wolf's heavy breathing. Today, there was nothing. My heart hammered against my ribs. Did he die? I'm here, I whispered, my voice cracking. The darkness at the back of the cell shifted. A pair of molten gold orbs ignited in the shadows. He was alive. I slid the tray through the narrow slot at the base of the silver bars. The wolf didn't move toward it. He stayed curled in the corner, his midnight fur matted with dried blood and filth. The silver chains were glowing with a soft, sickly violet light, the enchantment feeding on his life force, suppressing his ability to heal. "You have to eat," I said, leaning my forehead against the cold iron bars. I knew the law. No talking. But the law felt small compared to the sight of him wasting away. If you don't eat, they win. Silas and his father, they want you to fade away. Don't let them. The wolf's ear flicked. Slowly, painfully, he dragged himself across the stone. Every movement caused the silver links to sear his skin. The smell of burning hair and flesh reached me, and I had to cover my mouth to keep from gagging. He reached the tray, but didn't look at the food. He looked at me. He was so close now that I could see the individual whiskers on his snout and the jagged scars that crisscrossed his nose. He lowered his head and let out a huff of air that smelled like pine needles and iron. "I brought something else," I murmured. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, bruised apple I'd swiped from Martha's private stash. I reached my hand through the bars. This was death. If a guard walked in, I'd be executed on the spot. If the wolf snapped, I'd lose my hand. But as I held the red fruit out, the wolf didn't growl. He was incredibly still. He leaned forward, his wet nose brushing my palm. His skin was burning hot, the silver fever was taking hold. Gently, with a delicacy that broke my heart, he took the apple from my fingers. His teeth never grazed my skin. For a second, our spirits touched. A jolt of electricity shot up my arm, a vision flashing behind my eyes, a vast forest under a blood-red moon, a throne made of bone, and a man with hair the color of midnight looking at me with a smile that could level cities. I pulled my hand back, gasping. The wolf was watching me intensely, the apple forgotten on the floor. "Clara!" The shout from the stairs made me jump. I scrambled away from the bars just as Elias Thorne, the acting alpha, stepped into the light. He was a sharp-featured man, with eyes like flint. He looked at me, then at the tray, then at the wolf. "Why are you so close to the bars, human?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. I was just making sure he saw the food, sir." I lied, my voice trembling. "He's been sluggish." Elias walked to the bars and spat at the wolf. The king didn't even flinch. "He's dying," Elias said with a smirk. "The silver is finally doing its work. In 2 days, the moon festival begins. We'll bring the pack down here to watch the great king take his final breath. And you, Clara, you'll be the one to unlock the muzzle for the execution. It's only fitting that the lowest of the pack disposes of the trash." He turned on his heel and left. I looked back at the wolf. He was staring at the apple, then back at me. In the golden depths of his eyes, the weariness was gone. It was replaced by a cold, terrifying promise of fire. The next night, a storm rolled over the mountains. Thunder shook the tool shed, and rain lashed against the thin walls. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that jolt of electricity again. I felt the wolf's fever. I knew I shouldn't go. It was midnight, and the guards would be on high alert. But a voice in my head, a deep, resonant hum, was pulling me toward the pit. I grabbed my coat and a small jar of salvide made from crushed marigold and beeswax. It wouldn't cure silver burns, but it might dull the sting. The woods were a nightmare of mud and grasping branches. I avoided the main path, slipping through the underbrush like a fox. When I reached the pit, I saw the guards were huddled in their shack, distracted by a portable TV and the sound of the rain. I slipped inside the concrete entrance, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The basement was flooded. An inch of cold, black water covered the floor. The wolf was standing now, his legs shaking. He was fighting the chains, his muscles bunching and straining. The silver links were humming, a high-pitched whine that set my teeth on edge. "Stop," I hissed, running to the bars. "You'll kill yourself. The more you fight, the deeper they bite." The wolf turned his head. His eyes were bloodshot, glowing a violent, frantic orange. He didn't recognize me. The silver fever had turned his mind into a wasteland of pain. He lunged at the bars, his massive weight slamming into the iron.
Clang.
The sound echoed like a bell. "Please," I sobbed, reaching through the bars. I didn't care about the risk anymore. I grabbed the heavy silver chain draped over his shoulder, trying to shift it so it wouldn't cut so deep. The silver burned my human skin instantly. I gasped, the smell of my own searing flesh filling the air, but I didn't let go. I pressed my other hand against his hot, matted fur. "Cain," I whispered. I didn't know why I used that name. Cain listened to me. "It's Clara. You have to stay calm. Please." The wolf froze. The name seemed to act like a physical weight, settling his spirit. His breathing slowed. The frantic glow in his eyes faded back to gold. He looked down at my hand, the one clutching the silver chain. My skin was blistering, turning a raw red. With a low, guttural sound, he moved his head. He didn't bite. He pressed his forehead against my burning palm. A wave of warmth flooded through me. The pain in my hand didn't vanish, but it became bearable. Through the touch, I felt his thoughts. They weren't words, but images, a crown of frost, the feeling of running at 80 miles an hour, and a deep, gnawing loneliness that matched my own. "Why do you care?" The thought wasn't mine. It was his. It was a question echoed in the vibration of his fur against my skin. "Because they told me you were a monster," I whispered into the dark. "And they told me I was nothing.
They're wrong about me."
I think they're wrong about you, too." He let out a long, shuddering breath. For the first time in a year, the Alpha King rested his weight against the bars, allowing a human girl to hold him while the storm raged outside. But as the thunder cracked overhead, a different sound echoed from the stairs. The sound of heavy boots. I knew I smelled something sweet down here. A voice drawled. I spun around, my heart dropping into my stomach. Standing at the base of the stairs was Silas, holding a silver-tipped crossbow. He had a cruel, jagged grin on his face. "Clara, Clara, Clara," he sighed, shaking his head. "Treason is such an ugly color on you. I think it's time we showed Beta what his little kitchen girl has been up to." He leveled the crossbow at my chest. But before his finger could twitch on the trigger, a low, tectonic growl vibrated through the floorboards. Behind me, the wolf rose. He didn't look sick anymore. He didn't look tired. He looked like a god of death. And the silver chains, they were starting to smoke. The air in the pit turned electric. Silas's smug grin faltered as the growl behind me deepened, sounding less like an animal and more like a mountain splitting apart. The silver chains began to hiss against the wolf's fur, the violet light turning into a blinding, angry white. "Stay back, human," Silas barked, his voice climbing an octave. He shifted the aim of the crossbow from my heart to the wolf's head. "You're under the influence of a beast. Move, or I'll put a bolt through both of you." I didn't move. I stood my ground, my burnt hand still pressed against the wolf's flank. I could feel the heat radiating off him. It was no longer the heat of a fever, but the heat of a furnace. "Silas, put it down," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "He hasn't done anything. You're the one breaking protocol by being here after midnight." "Protocol?" Silas sneered, his courage returning as he stepped closer. "I'm a wolf. You're a servant. I am the protocol. My father wants this thing dead, and if I bring him your head along with the pelt of the king, he'll finally give me my own territory." He squeezed the trigger. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. The thwack of the crossbow string was deafening in the small space. The silver bolt hissed through the air, aimed directly between the wolf's eyes. But the wolf didn't dodge. A massive, fur-covered paw moved with a speed the human eye couldn't track.
Clang.
The wolf swiped the bolt out of the air, the silver tip shattering against the stone wall. Silas froze. His jaw dropped. That's impossible. The silver should have paralyzed you. The wolf stepped forward. The chains around his neck pulled taut, the enchantment screaming as they tried to hold him back. But the king wasn't fighting the chains anymore. He was absorbing them. The silver started to glow orange, then white, then it began to melt. Molten silver dripped onto the floor, sizzling in the black water. "Clara, move," a voice commanded. It wasn't a whisper in my head this time. It was a physical sound, a deep, gravelly baritone that vibrated in my very marrow. I scrambled to the side, pressing my back against the damp wall. With a roar that shook the entire concrete foundation of the pit, the wolf lunged. The heavy silver links snapped like dry twigs. The iron bars of the cell, reinforced by ancient magic, groaned and buckled as he tore through them with his bare teeth and claws. Silas screamed, dropping the crossbow and turning to flee up the stairs. But the wolf was faster. He didn't kill him, not yet. He pinned Silas against the stone stairs with a single paw, the boy's ribs creaking under the pressure. The wolf turned his head back to me. His eyes were no longer just gold. They were a burning, celestial fire. Slowly, the fur began to recede. The bones cracked and reshaped in a sickening, rhythmic thud. The massive wolf disappeared, and in its place stood a man. He was tall, broader than any wolf in our pack, his skin covered in the jagged, white scars of the silver chains. His hair was long and black, falling over shoulders that looked like they were carved from granite. Even standing naked in a flooded basement, he looked more like a king than Elias Thorne ever would. This was Cain, the Alpha King. He ignored the whimpering Silas and walked toward me. Every step was deliberate, powerful. I should have been terrified. I should have run. But as he stopped inches from me, I only felt a strange, overwhelming sense of belonging. He reached out a hand, a human hand, though his nails were still slightly claw-like, and gently took my burnt palm. He didn't say a word. He brought my hand to his lips and kissed the raw, blistered skin. The pain vanished instantly. A cool, soothing energy flowed from him into me, knitting my flesh back together until there wasn't even a scar left. "You fed me when I was a monster," he whispered, his eyes locked on mine. "You stayed when they told you I was nothing. Now, Clara, the world is going to learn exactly who we are." The escape from the stone pit was a blur of shadows and adrenaline. Cain didn't kill Silas, but he left him unconscious and bound in the very chains that had held the king for a year. It was a poetic justice that I found myself smiling at, despite the terror of our situation. We didn't take the path. Cain moved through the dense Kentucky woods like he was part of the wind itself. I struggled to keep up, my lungs burning, until he stopped, turned, and simply picked me up. He carried me against his chest, his skin radiating a heat that shielded me from the freezing rain. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice muffled against his shoulder. "The pack will hunt us. Elias will send everyone. They have silver-scented hounds." "Let them come," Cain said, his voice a low rumble. "They took my crown while I was weakened by treachery. They think I am alone. They forget that the earth itself remembers its king." He stopped at a clearing deep within the dead zone, a part of the territory where the trees were twisted and black, a place the Black Ridge Pack feared to enter. In the center stood an ancient stone altar, overgrown with moss. He set me down gently. The rain had stopped, replaced by a thick, eerie mist that clung to the ground. "They will be here soon," Cain said, turning to face the direction of the pack house. "Elias is a coward, but he is a desperate one. He knows that if I reach the northern borders, his life is forfeit." "Cain," I said, stepping toward him. "Why me?" Why did you let me in? You could have killed me 100 times. He turned to me, the moonlight catching the hard angles of his face. For a moment, the king vanished, and I saw the man who had suffered in the dark for a year. The silver didn't just bind my body, Clara. It tried to eat my soul. It tried to make me forget what it felt like to be human. Every day, you brought more than just food. You brought a piece of the world I thought I'd lost. You treated a monster with more dignity than your own kind treated you. He stepped closer, his thumb grazing my cheek. In my kingdom, we have a word for what you are to me. Anamkara, soul friend. But it is more than that. You are the heartbeat that kept me alive in that hole. A howl broke the silence. Then another.
Closer this time.
The hounds. They're here, I whispered, fear finally clawing at my throat. Cain's expression shifted. The tenderness vanished, replaced by a cold, predatory mask. He stood in front of me, shielding me from the tree line. Stand behind the altar, Clara. No matter what you see, do not leave the circle. Out of the darkness, a dozen pairs of glowing eyes emerged. Elias Thorne stepped into the clearing, flanked by his best enforcers. They were all in human form, carrying high-powered rifles loaded with silver-tipped rounds. Well, Elias sneered, though I could see his hands trembling as he leveled his gun at Cain. The king has fallen for a human girl. How pathetic. I thought you were a legend, Cain. It turns out you're just a dog on a leash, and the leash is a kitchen maid. Cain didn't growl. He didn't shift. He just stood there, his presence filling the clearing until the air felt too heavy to breathe. You stole a year of my life, Elias, Cain said softly. You used my own beta to poison me. You put silver in my blood and chains on my soul. And yet, here I stand. You stand in a graveyard. Elias shouted. Fire. The rifles barked, a dozen flashes of light illuminating the woods. I screamed, reaching out for Cain, but the bullets never hit him. As if the air itself had turned into liquid, the silver rounds slowed down, spinning harmlessly in the air before Cain's outstretched hand. He caught one between two fingers, looked at it with disdain, and let it drop into the mud. My turn, Cain whispered. He didn't shift into a wolf. He didn't need to. He moved like a shadow, a blur of motion that bypassed the enforcers entirely. He appeared directly in front of Elias, his hand closing around the alpha's throat. The enforcers froze, their weapons suddenly feeling very small. I am not a monster because I am a wolf, Elias, Cain said, lifting the man off the ground with one hand. I am a monster because of what I am willing to do to protect what is mine. He looked back at me, and for a split second, I saw a flash of that midnight wolf in his human eyes. And she, Cain growled, his voice echoing through the entire forest, is mine. The forest fell into a deathly silence. Elias Thorne, the man who had ruled the Black Ridge Pack with an iron fist and a cruel tongue, was gasping for air, his feet dangling inches above the mud. The enforcers, the same men who had laughed while I scrubbed floors, stood like statues. They were predators, but they were looking at a god. Please. Elias wheezed, his face turning a sickly shade of purple. The council, they'll destroy you. Cain leaned in close, his voice a lethal whisper that seemed to come from the earth itself. The council is made of old men who hide behind silver. I am the alpha of alphas. I am from the north.
And you?
You are a tick that grew fat on a throne you didn't earn. Cain didn't snap his neck. That would have been too quick. Instead, he dropped Elias into the mud. As the acting alpha scrambled backward, sobbing in terror, Cain looked at the enforcers. Any of you who wish to die for a coward, step forward, Cain challenged. One by one, the men lowered their rifles. They knelt, not out of respect, but out of the primal instinct to survive. They knew that the monster was back, and he was no longer in chains. Cain turned to me. The terrifying fire in his eyes softened the moment they landed on my face. He walked to the altar and held out his hand. "We cannot stay here, Clara. This territory is poisoned by their greed. My kingdom lies beyond the Great Smokies, where the snow never fully melts. Will you come?" I looked back at the dark woods, toward the life of nothingness I was leaving behind. I looked at my red, raw hands that were now healed by his touch. "I have nowhere else to go," I whispered. "I've been a prisoner here just as much as you were." He pulled me against him, his arms a fortress. "You are no longer a prisoner. You are the reason the king still breathes." With a sudden burst of speed, he didn't run, he leaped. We moved through the canopy of the trees, the wind whipping my hair. I closed my eyes, feeling the steady thrum of his heart against my ear. For the first time in my life, I felt safe. We traveled for 2 days, moving through the rugged wilderness of the American South, heading north. Cain stayed in his human form, though he moved with the grace of a predator. He hunted for us, bringing back wild berries and clean water, and at night, we huddled together in caves or under the shelter of ancient oaks. But something was following us. It wasn't the Black Ridge Pack. This was something darker. The air grew colder than the season allowed, and the shadows in the woods seemed to stretch and reach for us even in the middle of the day. "The council has released the shadow stalkers," Cain muttered on the 3rd night. We were camped in a rocky crevice high in the mountains. Ancient spirits bound by blood magic. They don't eat meat. They eat hope. "Can you fight them?" I asked, shivering. Cain looked at his hands. "The silver fever took much of my strength, Clara. I am healing, but my magic is tied to my land. We are still too far from the northern border." As if summoned by his words, the shadows at the mouth of the cave began to thicken. They looked like tall, gaunt figures made of smoke and ash, their eyes glowing with a faint, ghostly blue light. They didn't make a sound, but a feeling of profound sadness washed over me. I remembered the day my parents died. I remembered Silas's laughter. I remembered every moment I had ever felt small. "Clara, look at me." Cain's voice barked through the fog in my mind. He grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to lock eyes with him. "Don't let them in. They feed on the nothing they told you that you were.
You are not nothing.
You are the girl who looked at a monster and saw a man. You are stronger than their ghosts." He stood up, placing himself between me and the shadows. He let out a roar, but it wasn't a wolf's howl. It was a sound of pure authority. A golden light began to pulse from his chest, pushing back the blue mist. But the stalkers were relentless. They pressed forward, their cold fingers reaching for his throat. Cain stumbled, his knees hitting the rocky ground. The silver scars on his back began to glow with a sickly light, the remains of the poison reacting to the dark magic. "Cain!" I screamed. I didn't think so. I didn't have a weapon. I ran forward and threw my arms around his neck, shielding him with my own body. "Leave him alone," I yelled at the shadows. "He's suffered enough." As my skin touched his, something incredible happened. The soul bond the elders spoke of, the one they tried to prevent with their laws, snapped into place. My human heart and his king's soul synced. A shockwave of pure, white light exploded from the point where we touched. It wasn't cold like the silver or dark like the shadows. It was warm. It tasted like the apple one had given him. It felt like the mercy I had shown him in the dark. The shadow stalkers shrieked, their smoky forms evaporating into the night air. The cold vanished. Cain gasped, leaning his head against my chest. His breathing was heavy, but the glow of the silver fever was gone. His skin was clear. His power was back. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with wonder. You broke the curse, Clara. The silver wasn't just metal. It was a lock on my heart, and you just turned the key." He stood up, pulling me with him. He looked more powerful than ever, his presence so commanding it felt like the mountains themselves were bowing to him. "We are close now," he said, his voice deep and sure. "The border is just over the next ridge. But Clara, once we cross, there is no going back. You will be the queen of a pack that hasn't seen a human leader in 1,000 years. Are you ready?" I looked at my hands, then at him. "As long as I'm with you, I'm ready for anything." The air changed as we climbed the final peak. The humid, heavy scent of the south died away, replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of ozone and old snow. Below us lay the northern kingdom, a vast expanse of jagged peaks and ancient pines that looked like they had been painted by a god of winter. But the path was blocked. At the very edge of the ridge, where the forest gave way to a narrow stone bridge over a plunging gorge, stood the council. 6 elders in heavy furs, their faces etched with the bitterness of centuries. And beside them stood Silas, his ribs taped, holding a staff of pure silver that hummed with a low, killing vibration. "You shall not pass, traitor," the eldest, a man named Malachi, shouted. His voice echoed across the canyon. "To bring a human into the sacred lands is to invite the rot of weakness into our blood. The law is absolute." Cain stopped at the foot of the bridge. He didn't shift. He didn't growl. He simply stood there, his hand locked firmly in mine. "The law was written to keep you in power, Malachi. It was written because you feared a king who could find strength in something other than cruelty." "She is a kitchen maid," Silas spat, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and hate. "She is a flea on the back of a dog. Give her to us, Cain, and maybe we will let you live in exile." Cain's grip on my hand tightened. I felt the surge of his power, no longer a wild, chaotic fire, but a steady, unbreakable tide. "You have called her nothing for her entire life," Cain said, his voice rising until it shook the very stones beneath our feet. "But she is the only soul in this world who saw the king when he was in the dirt. She is my mate. She is your queen. And if you want her, you will have to walk through the fire of my soul to get to her." Silas raised the silver staff. "Then die with your human." He slammed the staff into the ground. A wave of silver lightning rippled across the bridge, a jagged vein of light meant to paralyze any wolf it touched. Cain didn't flinch. He stepped forward, taking the full brunt of the silver strike. I screamed, trying to pull him back, but the light didn't burn him. It hit his chest and shattered like glass. "The silver cannot hold what has already been set free," Cain roared. He shifted midair. The transformation was majestic. He didn't just become a wolf. He became a force of nature. A midnight beast the size of a small cabin, his fur shimmering with the white light of the bond we shared. He cleared the bridge in a single, impossible leap. The council scrambled, their ancient magic failing against the sheer, raw authority of the Alpha King. Silas tried to swing the staff, but with one flick of a massive paw, Cain sent the silver weapon spinning into the abyss below. Cain didn't kill them. He stood over them, his snout inches from Malachi's face, a low vibration in his throat that made the elders fall to their knees. "The era of the stone pit is over," Cain's voice echoed in all our minds. "Go back to your halls. Tell the packs that the king has returned, and tell them he did not return alone." The northern pack house was not a mansion of glass and steel like the one I had left behind. It was a fortress of stone and timber, built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by waterfalls that never froze. As we walked through the gates, thousands of wolves stood in silence. Some were in human form, some in their fur. They looked at Cain with awe, but they looked at me with a confusion that bordered on hostility. I was small, covered in mud, and human. I could feel their judgment like a physical weight. Cain stopped in the center of the great hall. He turned to the crowd, his arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me into his side. "I know what you see," Cain addressed his people. "You see a human. You see a girl from the kitchens of our enemies. You see someone you think is fragile." He looked down at me, and for a moment, the world disappeared. But when I was chained in the dark, when my own blood had betrayed me and the silver was eating my mind, it was not a wolf who saved me. It was not a warrior who gave me hope. It was this fragile girl who brought me bread and showed me mercy when she had none for herself. He lifted my hand, the one that had been burnt by the silver chains, now smooth and clear. She is the heart of this kingdom. Without her, I am just a beast in a cage. With her, I am your king. If any man or woman among you thinks she is unworthy, speak now and face the Alpha's challenge. Silence. Total, absolute silence. Then, a young wolf in the front row, a boy no older than 10, stepped forward. He knelt, placing his forehead against the hem of my dirt-stained jeans. One by one, the rest followed. A sea of wolves, bowing not to a crown, but to the girl who had brought food to a monster. I looked at Cain, tears blurring my vision.
I'm just Clara, I vispred.
No, he said, kissing my forehead as the sun began to rise over the snowy peaks. You are everything. 6 months had passed since the chains broke. The northern kingdom was thriving. The stone pit in the south had been demolished, and the laws of the council were being rewritten in ink, not blood. I stood on the balcony of our chambers, watching the first snow of the season drift down onto the pines. I wore a cloak of heavy charcoal wool, lined with the softest fur, but I didn't feel the cold. I never felt the cold anymore. A pair of strong arms wrapped around me from behind. I leaned back into Cain's chest, smelling the familiar scent of pine and rain. Thinking about the kitchens, he teased, his voice a low vibration against my spine. Sometimes, I admitted, turning in his arms. I think about the girl who was afraid to walk down those stairs. She feels like a stranger now. Cain tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His golden eyes were bright, filled with a peace I had never seen in the pit. She was never a stranger, Clara. She was just waiting for a reason to find her strength. I'm just glad I was the monster she chose to save. He picked me up, swirling me around as the snow fell faster, our laughter echoing off the ancient stones of the fortress. We weren't just a king and a queen. We weren't just a wolf and a human. We were two souls that had found a home in the middle of a storm. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for the chains to clink. I was exactly where I was meant to be. I want to hear from you. What part of the story did you find most intriguing? Was it the moment Cain broke his chains, or the quiet moment in the cave when Clara's bond saved him from the shadows? Do you think the council will ever truly accept a human queen, or is there more trouble brewing in the South? Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this journey. Your subscription is a huge support and truly means the world to me. My channel is still young and trying to grow, and every single one of you makes a difference. I'll see you in the next interesting story.